In the previous video, we had a look at recreating the sample project. And as promised, in this one, we're gonna focus a little bit more on the action mappings, or in OpenVR, we call them Boolean actions, all right? So before we get started, I did actually forget something from the last video. If you click on project description, we actually need to specify a project name. So I'm gonna put SteamVR demo on this one. What this does is it uniquely identifies this particular project to SteamVR, to the SteamVR runtime. So it just saves a little bit of a headache during troubleshooting and during different versions of the SteamVR runtime. So just make sure that you have a project name here, okay? So that's the last bit of setup that I forgot to mention on the last video. All right, so just going back to engine input, right, and to the action mapping, let's create a new one. For this demo, I'm gonna be creating a new action which manually triggers the JoJoF character to jump up and down, right? So I'm gonna just say jump for joy. Oops, jump for joy. Right, so when you, in the index controller, if you press the A button on the left controller, we're gonna make the JoJoF character jump. So just gonna type SteamVR index and then A. So maybe A press, make it a bit easier to find. So SteamVR valve index controller left A press. So for the index controller, which I'm using for this demo, the left controller, and if you press the A button, it will trigger the action called jump for joy, this new action. Since this is new, let's go to the setting. In the previous video, I showed where the actual JSON files are located, right? So SteamVRInput demo, you're gonna look at the config and then SteamVR bindings. And you would see the SteamVR manifest JSON file. So what the manifest JSON file actually has is just a list of actions and everything and metadata regarding those specific actions that you can bind in SteamVR. So we need to regenerate the action manifest since we created a new action. You don't need to do this when you just add bindings, but when you create a new action, you need to regenerate the action manifest. And just to quickly see if that works, let me just clear this. SteamVRInput, regenerate action manifest with C. I'll do jump for joy, right? You can see we've created a temporary action. You don't need to worry about temporary actions, just don't use them. They will be regenerated for you automatically. And then you can see that we have a new action handle called jump for joy, which will be reflected in the SteamVR underscore manifest.json file here. Okay, you don't need to touch the JSON files if you're just using everything directly from the plugin. Okay, so we've created the list of actions. Now we want to create, for the SteamVR valve index controller, map this input to the action, but only for the valve index controller. So if we're looking at it from the JSON file area, this knuckles.json here needs to be also updated, right? Without updating any of the other controllers. So how do we do that? We click SteamVRInput here, regenerate controller bindings, and we should have an updated knuckles.json file in there, right? It might go through all of the other controller binding files, but it would only add the jump for joy action binding to this index controller. I'll show you in a while. And to do that, we just launch the SteamVR bindings dashboard just to show you. We go to edit, right? And if we go to bottom here, we should be able to see, where's the A button, right? So now we have a new action called jump for joy for the index controller mapped to the A button. But if we go back and then just change this to Oculus Touch, for example, and click edit, the A button for the Oculus Touch is on the right because you have X and Y in there. you could see that there's no action map. All right. But for the index controller, just saw something that I should have mentioned, one sec. But you could see that the action is there, but nothing is mapped, right? But if we go back to index controller, click edit, it's not showing us a warning here that we haven't mapped anything, any action, so no actions is left unmapped. And we actually have the A button in here, jump for joy. Cool. So now let's put some code in the editor to make it all work. I'm just gonna close that for now. And if we go back to the content browser, and we're done here, but if you just type bp underscore, all of the blueprint in the sample content will come up. And if you remember, right, if with this controller, in the demo project, you have to actually grab the controller in order to control the Joseph character, right? So we're gonna short circuit that a little bit, because when you pick up the controller, you click enable input, and that's the only time that the input is enabled. But we're just gonna short circuit it by doing this. Like grab event begin play and then plug it into enable input to make sure that input is active. And let's just do it from here. Let's add the new action called jump for joy, right? So jump for joy. And it's called my pawn, but if you click here, my pawn, it's actually a BP Joseph character. So we're gonna want it to jump, right? And then when it's pressed, just plug it in there, right? And compile and save. So now we updated the code, but you notice we haven't actually done any restarts of the editor to correctly register the code and all of the action settings and bindings to SteamVR. SteamVR already recognizes them because we have them in the JSON files, but just to reset all of the input system from within the editor, you'll actually need to reload the action manifest. This is only if you do a new action, which we did for this demo, which is a jump for joy. To just make sure that if you click VR preview now, that the actual input works. Let's do that now. Just gonna press Shift F1. Move this here. Click inside to make sure that the input actually works. I'm gonna turn on the left controller. I'm not gonna put on the headset. Just gonna position it so you can see the Joseph character, and I'm gonna press the A button, and that should make the Joseph jump, right? So pressing the A without actually doing a peace sign, I'm gonna do a fist in my controller here, and then just press A just so that you could see that I'm just pressing A, and that action should be working, right? Cool. So going back here, let's go to settings, project settings, engine input, right? So I showed you that we don't have any input mapping for the Oculus Touch. So let's add that now. So SteamVR, just make sure it's our provided input stuff. Oculus Touch A press, right over there. And if you go back here, since we didn't do a new action, we don't need to regenerate the action manifest, nor do we need to do a reload action manifest. We just need to regenerate the controller bindings. So generate that, it's in VR input. And let's launch this thing again. Just change that quickly to Oculus Touch and click edit and see if we've got a button. Yep, and you can see that the A button, you've got jump for joy. And one other quick tip while I'm here, I'm just going to go back to the index controller and then click edit. Is if you hit input debugger, you should be able to, if you see jump for joy here, that means it's correctly mapped for your game, right? So input A, click, And from here, input a click. So if I actually click, this is coming from this side of this input debugger actually comes from any input here comes from the driver. So if I input a click, right, that should trigger that. And as you probably noticed here, if I click that, it should trigger that too. So that just shows you that everything is working perfectly from the manifests that we have in Unreal and from here, from the driver, right? This will help you isolate input issues. So this is pretty useful. It's actually very useful for your tests. Alrighty, so that's all the info I have for you for key actions. Pretty simple, but it does open up a lot of things from here, from the demo, where I could show you, where I showed you how to have different controllers, have a look at it, and have different inputs for different controllers, and how to do a bit of debugging as well. All right, in the next video, we'll focus a little bit on the axis mappings, which is a slightly more complicated because of vector 2 actions, which this input UI doesn't actually support, but we'll tackle that on the next video. So thanks folks, and I'll see you on the next video.